Welcome to another episode, a special episode of the Beyond Data Management Podcast, powered as always by our friends at HS GovTech. I'm your host, Cameron Garrison. Going to be fun today. Bear with us. We're experimenting a little bit. We've never had this many people on at the same time, but we're looking to do this as a recurring spot. And that is, it comes through in every episode that we've had. And the life of environmental health inspectors is just wild. And most people have no idea what goes on in the average day and some of the things they observe. So we're going to do a regular recurring here, which is on the beat in the field with actual inspectors. And on this first one, it's going to be panel style. Very excited because every single person that I'm about to introduce to you today is with HS GovTech. But every one of them also has spent a huge amount of their career in the field with local health departments. So in studio, becoming a familiar face, as I said before, if you keep showing up like this, I think you're going to pick up the co-host title.
There you go. There you go.
But Chirag Bhatt, our Director of Regulatory Affairs here at HS, and former Bureau Chief and longtime with the City of Houston Environmental Health Department, and someone, again, who's familiar to this audience and to all of you all. Out in the virtual world, we are going to be introducing three, again, of HS GovTech's finest here. All senior project managers, also all have worked for environmental health departments before they ended up in their current roles. So they've seen a thing or two, which we'll be talking about today. And I'll introduce them here. Caitlin Gappa, the former director of the Douglas County Environmental Health Department in Colorado, just outside of Denver there, and now a senior project manager, as we mentioned, with HS. Two, I believe, on your screen as well. And if you're all of this talk about boxes and on your screen, if you are obviously on YouTube, that all makes sense to you. If you're on, Apple Music or Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, obviously it's audio only. So sorry for all the over-explaining. You can, though, if you want, go catch the video feed on YouTube and coming soon to Spotify. So anyway, just a housekeeping item there for the people listening in their car and they're like, what's he talking about? Mm-hmm. To the right, we have Melissa Rogerson, and Melissa also from Colorado, and has some inspection stories that'll just roll your socks up and down. And then also a friend of the podcast just recently did her own standalone episode, and it was fantastic. Kristen Geary, formerly from the Jackson County, Missouri Environmental Health Department, and now also a senior project management at HS GovTech. Welcome to all of you all. I'm looking forward to this. This is the most voices we've ever had in the room at the same time. All righty. So I don't know who really wants to go first, but Chirag, maybe just as a backstory, we've been talking about this concept now for some time, right?
Yeah, it should be really exciting because, when you go out in the field and you see things that just very unique and very crazy and bizarre at the same time, you tend to remember those for your life. And whether this happened 10 years ago, 10 days ago, or 20 years ago in some cases, those stories will always stick in your mind. So yeah, I'm really excited talking to Caitlin, Melissa, and Kristen, and hear some stories and maybe interact with it, and maybe once in a while chime in with my own.
It'll be awesome. Yeah, I'm really happy we're doing it. And these stories deserve to be told.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see that people, not just the people care about it. Dr. Dijak's episode where we were talking about, I think he and I determined that we were the only two nerds brave enough to use the word intimate to describe environmental health, but it really is. And because of that, the general public cares about these stories as well. It's very, very interesting information to just everybody. So enough of the setup. Let's get to it. So why don't we start, Caitlin, with you? You've also been, all three of you all have done episodes at the time that this airs. Maybe all three of y'all's episodes haven't aired yet, but all three of you have done episodes on your own. But Caitlin, welcome back. And how are things? How's summer starting in Colorado?
Oh, it's been pretty wet, which is weird for Colorado, but it's been a good start, I think.
Awesome. All right. So, in no particular order, I'll put you on the spot first. A lot of times people think of EH as just food inspections. It's so much more than that. And some of the stories, not all of them, are food related. So, Caitlin, go ahead. Throw the first one out there. Real life story. I believe all of yours are ones you observed personally, right? You're not telling someone else's.
I tried to make sure they were all ones that I saw myself because I want other people to have the opportunity to tell their story. But so when I was the director of environmental health in Douglas County, I had kind of an ignorance is bliss policy because some places I didn't want to know how they did on the inspections because they're my favorite places to eat. So this one I did not actually see, but we received a complaint online with a picture of a restaurant that had shrimp in the back on the hood of a car de-thawing. And my one of our admin staff came in and said, "You will never believe this picture. You have to come see it." So I went and looked at the picture, and I started getting a bad gut feeling based on where the car was. And I said, what restaurant is this? And when she told me it was one of my ignorance is bliss restaurants, and I was so disappointed. So we went out and we did an investigation, and the shrimp were no longer on the hood, but they admitted that they had been out there. But they said, "Oh no, this was our lunch shrimp." So
Sure.
Hmm. So, Caitlin, funny thing you mentioned a box of shrimp on a hood of a car. During my inspection days, many times this would happen. You are done with your inspection, and the operator follows you to your car with a box of shrimp. So I'm wondering if that box of shrimp came all the way to Houston from Colorado, and it was being offered to me. And even though I told him, I said, no, I don't eat seafood. I don't eat anything like that. And said, no, please take it. Please take it. It's for you. So maybe that's what they were doing. They were throwing it out for me.
maybe. That's so funny that you say that, though. I had that happen where
Yeah.
operators would leave you food on the roof of your car because you can't accept it, right? It's technically a bribe or whatever. So yeah, I had places that would just leave boxes of food on my car if they saw me pull in.
Yeah. And sometimes, it's probably culture based that
Yeah.
many agency, many facilities actually have different culture, and just a very customary thing for them to offer something.
Yes,
No
absolutely.
ill intent in many cases, but yeah, say, oh, no, I don't need the box of shrimp.
Animals are a recurring theme in a lot of these stories, aren't they? We had when Sarah Jensen was on recently, she stumbled into basically an illegal goat butchering operation in a closet in the back of a facility. Like, you guys encounter like wild things. Caitlin, I think you have a couple of other animal ones, and we'll pivot on through the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I think my animal ones are super exciting. As you might know, I used to be a meat judging or be on the meat judging team in college. And so I was pretty used to seeing carcasses in coolers just hanging out. But in restaurants, that's not as common. I did find a carcass in a market one time, and I got so excited because I knew all about the USDA stamps, and I wanted to show the inspector that I was training all about the USDA stamps. And so I pulled him over to the carcass and I was like, "Okay, we're going to look for the stamp and I'm going to tell you what grade animal this is." And we got over to it and it didn't have a USDA stamp, which was illegal. So we got to write up an unapproved source violation. And that was also a first time for that inspector. So it was a great training opportunity, but not the training opportunity I had hoped for.
Not the carcass you were expecting.
No, expecting.
All right, Melissa. And you're Colorado Springs. Is that like where you're in Colorado Springs, right? El Paso County,
Yep.
Colorado
Yep.
territory there.
Yep. Yeah, Colorado Springs is about 60 miles south of Denver, so a little south of Caitlin as well. And yeah, we actually have bordering counties that we used to work together. And crazy enough, we never met each other, even though we had very similar stories. So, but yeah, it's fun to have a neighbor nearby.
Yeah. And we're not picking on Colorado places, just so happens that both of them are from there. So some of yours, the previews of them I saw really made me laugh. So you could, again, feel free to start wherever you'd like and throw the story out there.
Sure. Yeah, I did food inspections for like 5 years, but I think a lot of these nasty stories have left my brain. I think I purposefully did that. But I do, I'll just start with food because that's kind of where we're at. But I always just remember like my least favorite inspection. I always wore ballet flats, probably not the best idea to do inspections in, and they were not like they were not slip resistant or anything like that. But walking into a chicken restaurant that had an entire walk-in cooler designated to their raw chicken, um, and walking in with my shoes, not realizing it, I walked into a big puddle at the bottom of the walk-in cooler, probably water that they tried to clean the floors with, but fair guess to say it was a lot of chicken juice, raw chicken juice as well. And it was so high that it poured into my shoe. So not my favorite moment. But it also had such a bad stink that I think everyone here can talk about, kind of sometimes that bad stink that can come from raw chicken, that I had to walk out and kind of stand over the trash can to clean my thermometer off, to catch my breath to go back in. So,
it was so bad that you're catching your breath. Like, oh gosh.
Yeah, I just have to walk out. Yeah, so sometimes it's like undescribable, that smell that we all know so well. But it's just it's fun.
What is El Paso County's policy on replacing shoes that get ruined by raw chicken juice?
Honestly, luckily they were like washable, because they were kind of like, I don't know about everybody else, but they might say the same thing. You kind of have like inspection shoes that you only wear for your inspections.
Really?
So that when this happens, I don't really wear them anywhere else.
Okay, so let's double click on that for a second. Everybody, I was looking off of the monitor, they're all here. Everybody nodded like in almost violent agreement about that. So what is the preferred inspection shoe of you three professional inspectors?
Absolutely ballet flats.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They definitely had to be closed-toed, so that's why I went with the ballet flats, because they were the most, I guess, attractive version of it.
So there's a style component in here for you.
Absolutely. Like you wanted to look professional, but wearing a high heel into a walk-in cooler like that is just asking for.
Yeah, that's no good.
No.
So what is the rest of the wardrobe? Actually, like, we're on the topic, and did any of your departments, when you were in departments, give you guidelines or dress codes, or how does that work in various agencies?
Yeah, everybody has a dress code, and by the way, I never did wear a ballet flat while I was doing inspections.
Okay, Sarah Shog, it's a safe space. You can own
right?
it.
Thankfully,
so if anybody wants to go play with like AI and get us a picture of Shirag and ballet flats, beyond at hscloudsuite.com.
Right. Yeah, but everybody has a dress code. Most agencies should have a dress code that, it's got to be proper. But like you said, Melissa, there's like a certain set of clothing and shoes that you only keep for the work time, and then rest of the time during weekends and on your own, you don't wear the same clothes, because, for example, if you inspect a barbecue restaurant, at the end of the day, you're going to go home and your spouse, your partner is going to say, "Oh my God, you smell like barbecue."
Yes. Or just food inspections in general. I always got that from my spouse too. That was like, "Man, you smell like those restaurants," and so quickly want to change your clothes when you get home.
Wow, raw chicken juice in the shoes. All right, Kristen, let's go out to Missouri now. And she has her own set of stories, and again, from across multiple programs. So go ahead, throw one into the fire.
Well, just to add on to the wardrobe discussion, we hired a new inspector straight out of college, and she showed up on her first day in not like really expensive clothes, but very nice professional clothing, like really nice professional clothing, slacks and a blouse. And we had a flood, and she got to go out with our manager to inspect the food in a flood in a gas station to check for, splashed, flood water splashed up on packaging of food and stuff. And she came back very, very upset about having to go through the flood water. And it wasn't like super deep, but it was, yeah, she was very upset. So you don't wear your nicest Sunday clothes to do inspections because you don't know where you're going to be from day to day.
Is it getting to be, you think, more difficult to get young people coming out of college with a science degree to be willing to wade through sewage, water, all the things that you all have to deal with?
I don't know. I mean, I liked the variance of every day you didn't know what you were going to be doing. And so I really enjoyed that part of it. And so we had handled those, what we would call them as emergency call outs. That we would go out, we would get called in to deal with things like that. And that really broke up the day and gave you something completely different. So those types of things were some of my favorite things to work through. When you got called out to a fire, a flood, broken water pipe, ceilings falling in, things along those lines. I found those to be very interesting and enjoyed that aspect of the job.
So if you don't mind, there is something I literally laughed out loud when I saw what one of your stories was about.
Yeah, which one?
How about we play the game of, is it a mouse dropping? A sesame seed? Could be anything. That one really made me laugh. Tell us that one if you don't mind.
Sure. So I was fairly new on the inspection scene, and there were stories about this place. And typically, if the inspectors are talking about you, it's not always a good thing. So I kind of knew the lady was a little off the wall. There was a story about her walking into the office, being upset over a reinspection fee because she didn't have any sanitizer in the office or in the building. And so she walked in with a bottle of bleach and stuck it in the lap of our administrative assistant. And it was open because I think it ruined a pair of pants. And so I knew about her, but we were walking through and they had a mouse problem and there were mouse droppings in various places throughout. And she would walk right behind me, get up really, really close to it and stick her finger and touch it and say, "It's a sesame seed. It's a sesame seed," as it's dissolving in her hands.
Oh my gosh. So she was really selling it if she's handling it, and she knew what it was, right?
Yeah, they had sushi there, or they were using black sesame seeds, so she was really trying to sell it.
Yeah, the size, Kristen, is so different when you look at the sesame seed versus a mouse dropping or rat dropping for that matter. So that's weird that they would even try to use that excuse.
Oh, so you're saying it dissolved in her hand? That is very descriptive.
Well, an older dropping is a little less, it doesn't have as much moisture.
When I was with the health department, I taught the certification course for quite a few years. And during the pest control session that we would talk about, I would actually make a little humorous jokes inside that, mouse dropping, rat droppings, there is a difference. You can tell whether you have an infestation at this time or this is an old dropping or not. And then I actually, believe it or not, I used to give an example that if it is an old dropping, it'll be crunchy like a sesame seed, because you brought up the sesame seed. So I had to share that. And then, I told him, I said, if it's fresh, you will not be able to even pick it up and identify whether it's old or fresh.
Oh, I know. And talk about infestations. We had a place, and it was just a little small place. And I came in, we had just switched territories. And so I was new to the territory, and they had mouse issues. And I walked in and there were mouse droppings on every surface. There were mouse droppings on cases, on the tables. It was a chicken place. So like the table, like the display table, there were mouse droppings on the display table. There were mouse droppings on under the cash register. There was a box of kids' meal bags, and there was a hole in the side of the box, and there was nesting material where they had been shredding up the kids' meal bags and like nesting in the box, and they were using those bags to like stuff kids like meals in to send them out the door. They were using them. It was an active. It was bad. It was bad. We ended up. I don't think I ever saw more mouse poop than during that particular inspection, and it took us a while to get it under control. And we ended up closing them down, but the manager was brand new. The district manager was brand new. And I think the district manager, he did everything I asked him to do. But I'm under the impression that he lost his job because of it. And I'm like, he was brand new to the territory. So I think he just spent too much money fixing the problem.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that nobody's listening to this episode while eating lunch and having some kind of sesame seed on their sushi.
I'm sorry, we ruined that sandwich.
That's going to be ruined.
And also, Shrag, I'm sure like you very limited scenarios, probably definitely not at parties, right, where you can pull out that encyclopedic knowledge of size, consistency, texture of rodent feces.
No, you'll be kicked out.
Yeah, they'll be like, don't talk to him. That's the weird rodent guy.
I know.
He's going to tell you how you know if it's old or not based on how wet it is.
Yeah, you either get kicked out or you never get invited to the next gathering.
Sometimes both, if you really gross them out. I think so. You know, what's interesting, we talked about it's not just food, and body art is one that most of the time is under environmental health to some degree. It varies state to state. Or artist license, the facility, et cetera. But I think several of you had those. Caitlin, you have not had probably the best impression of some of the body arts based on the behind the scenes from an inspection standpoint, have you?
Actually, I would say body artists were probably my favorite because most of them are very, very cognizant of maintaining health standards and protecting themselves from bloodborne pathogens. So overall, I really enjoyed them, but I did have one really sketchy operator who was like operating in a really weird back room of a salon. And when we first went to open him, we like left some example inspection reports just so that, we talked through it so they could know what to expect from their inspection. And we left it, and it said example on it. It was very like clear, but he had taken the paper and like kind of removed the example and forged his own documents to say that he was approved, even though he wasn't approved yet. And so like it just started off on a sketchy foot. And then we were trying to go back and do the inspection after he had finally gotten approved, and he wouldn't answer his phone. He was never there. And finally I got a hold of him and scheduled the inspection, and we went out there and his friend was there. He didn't even want to talk to us. He had just like sent his friend to the wolves. His friend wasn't a tattooed artist. He didn't know anything about inspections. He didn't know where anything was. It was kind of a disaster. So that one left me with a pretty bad taste in my mouth. And later on, when you go do inspections in small towns, everybody kind of asks about everybody else. And I had some other artists in the area asking me like, do you know anything about this guy? We're hearing he's really sketchy. He's doing drugs in the back. He's maybe reusing needles. What do you think? And I, you can't really say anything, but I was like, that kind of lines up.
Oh, wow. And that's really the nightmare scenario, right? Reusing needles. Like that's where they spread disease.
Absolutely. It was not a good thing to hear for sure.
Obviously, it's not zero. How often do you think that happens? And I know there's you're not like an exact answer on data, but it's not zero. Is it more often than people would be comfortable with in your guesstimation?
I think it's more common in non-regulated facilities. So regulated facilities, I think, have a really, really low rate, especially because a lot of them are disposable now and they're really cheap. So it's not common to reuse at all. But if you're, getting a tattoo from some guy in a back alley or on his couch in a bad part of town, you might be a little more concerned.
Do people get tattoos in back alleys? Wow. Like, I feel like you should have a moment where you question a few life choices if you're about to get a random guy tatting you like in an alley somewhere.
We did used to get complaints about, somebody's front porch or in their living room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Where is the line in body art? And I know it probably varies state to state, but like, can you give a friend privately a tattoo if you're an artist, or like where is it personal versus where the rules start?
It does vary state to state, but for us, it was if you were doing it for money,
For money.
and you were
Yeah.
licensed.
Interesting. Anybody else have anything on
It's,
body art they want to chime in on?
yeah. I would just echo some of the things Caitlin said, but it's interesting how even though our counties border each other, how different our body art programs are, and body art is usually very different locally. There might be some states with state regulations, but here it was like local regulations. So um, our program, since we have a lot of military presence in our town, and the military required them to go to a licensed facility, they were really strong on having the rules and regulations for themselves. So, to back what Caitlin said, a lot of them really wanted to do things right, but at the same time, that caused a huge kind of divide between a lot of the body artists that were doing things wrong and they were doing them without a license. So it was really big in our county to, I would say like half of our complaints were always that there's an unlicensed artist somewhere. And so those stories you were just saying of them being in their house, being in a sketchy back room of a salon, like that was very common here for us to investigate complaints like that. And very hard to bring them into to get them licensed, to get them into compliance, because if they're at their house, there's very limited things we can do. We can't just like walk in or storm in and say like you need a license. And our rules were that you could not um, perform body art procedures inside of a home or inside of something that's shared, a residence, or like where you cook food and all of that. So even some people that were opening shops to try to separate them from their house, it was really difficult to do. So it really pushed people into these commercial spaces that then would push people without as much funding into doing it unlicensed. So we got a lot of unlicensed complaint things and a lot of people doing the wrong thing. Opposite of Caitlin saying that a lot of them want to do the right thing. The people who want to do the right thing do a really good job at, using clean, sterile equipment, but the people who don't.
So I'm guessing all of you all would recommend anybody want to get a tattoo, go to your health department's website and look up the inspections if they're one of the many that provide it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Know what you're about to get injected with other than ink.
Ask for certification, credentials. Absolutely. It's so important because, that becomes permanent part of your skin. So
I think if you ask the average person on the street, one of the top few things that would gross them out in a restaurant somewhere, I think, Shirag, right? Cockroaches is going to come up.
Yep.
Well, you say we talk cockroaches with here. Also, they're so common, right? And I want to say up front, everybody who's in environmental health knows not the most dangerous violation, like at least, temperatures. There are things that are way more dangerous that get marked, but they get your attention. Caitlin, let's start with you. I think everybody's got cockroach stories. We'll sort of go in order. We'll go Caitlin, Melissa, Kirsten, and let's talk roaches.
Yay, roaches. I think one thing I was thinking of when we were sharing our stories earlier is everybody kind of has a thing that they end up when they're an inspector that they always see, it feels like. And for me, it was cockroaches, which is hilarious because when I started inspecting, I didn't even know there were cockroaches in Colorado. I was so naive and happy.
How long before cockroaches disabused you of that notion?
I think it was like my second or third inspection. I went. I was training with somebody, and we walked in, and she just took a deep breath and said, "Ooh, can you smell the cockroaches?" And I was like, "What? What? You can smell them?" And sure enough, she was right. So we got into the kitchen and we're inspecting, and she was showing me like you can see tracks. If it's a really bad infestation, you can see where the cockroaches run, underneath cabinets or behind prep tables. And they definitely had a scent to them. So that was my first like cockroach encounter, was like one of the worst infestations I've ever seen. and I was like, oh, there's really cockroaches here. And then like a couple weeks later, we got a complaint from a woman who was like pretty hysterical, saying that she was just walking down the street, um, and happened to look into an apartment window, and there were like millions of cockroaches crawling all over in this apartment. And so, now I was like, okay, there really are cockroaches in Colorado, but they can't be that bad. And so we went out and we kind of put it off until the next day to go out to this apartment complex. And as we were walking up to the apartment, there were like cockroaches in the yard. They were crawling on the sidewalk, they were in the stairwell. And we put on little booties to protect ourselves and went into this apartment. It was empty, except for like a big ancho chili, like dried ancho chili plant bundle. And the inspector I was with kicked it, and like thousands of cockroaches just like flew out of this. And at that point, I was like, okay, I believe they're here, and I never want to see them again. It was really gross.
Wow. So you really, really wanted to believe that they weren't a thing and weren't around, didn't you?
I really did. They're really gross. I know they're not that, like, from a health standpoint, they're probably like one of the less likely things to make you sick, but they're just
So
heebie-jeebie.
I have to ask, it's the obvious follow-up question. What do cockroaches smell like? And does everybody agree that you can smell a big infestation?
So to answer what they smell like, it's like a really musty smell that I noticed. I don't know if anybody else has ever smelled them.
Yeah, I don't know. Is anybody else like that's a new one to me. I didn't realize that. That's interesting. Maybe a sixth sense, the cockroach the ability to pick it up. Who else? So we'll go next. Melissa, cockroaches. Surely
Sure.
you've encountered them.
Sure. I couldn't tell you what they smell like. I think maybe somebody who's done a little bit more food than me would agree with Caitlin, but I was a new inspector, and much like Caitlin growing up here in Colorado, I didn't know that we had cockroaches here. I had just studied abroad when I was in college in Costa Rica, where they have flying, hissing, massive cockroaches, and so that's what I thought a cockroach looked like. And so I'm doing an inspection and washing my hands, and there's this little bug that crawls up the wall, very little. And I said something as I was writing up my report, and I was going over the report with him. I was like, well, I noticed you might have some bug problems. And the manager actually looked at me and said, that was a cockroach. And so for them to be out in the open, like walking up the wall as I'm washing my hands, means that there was a bigger problem that I didn't even see. So that was my first experience to them saying, okay, apparently I don't know what they look like here or what I should be looking for. So getting more training after that so that I can better assist in the future. But yeah, that was my first experience, just not knowing what they were.
So that's so funny. So on one hand, Caitlin wanted to just believe in their lack of existence, and you believe they were a lot bigger, nastier, and gnarlier than they actually are in North America. That's funny. All right, Kristen, what do you have to contribute to the conversation?
Well, I can say that I am not a good smeller of cockroaches. I'm very good at visual evidence, and I can say that the story that I remember the most that involved cockroaches was involving a long-term extended stay motel. And somebody had been they'd been there for 6 months or more, and they got kicked out, and they called and complained. That was a pretty common occurrence, is we didn't hear anything until somebody got kicked out, and then they would call and complain about it. And so we went and we responded the same day to go investigate. And we walked into that room, and there were hamburgers smashed into the floor, dirty diapers just laying around.
Come on.
Dog poop everywhere. Stuff had been spilled into the carpeting. And so there were, big old stains. I mean, you could clearly tell they'd been there for a long time, but they invited the roaches in. And there were roaches, and they were everywhere. And so, yeah, that wasn't pleasant. And it's really hard to, the motel had not had a chance to even clean the room up, but it's a really common problem that the extended stay hotels have or at least the ones that we were dealing with, of, trying to make sure that those rooms are treated on a regular basis when they're letting people stay for long periods of time.
And long periods of time, people settle in, and if they're a slob, it only takes a matter of time for that environment to follow, doesn't it?
It does. And if you think about it, a lot of the people that are staying in those places have lost their homes, and they have everything they own stuffed into that room. And so they'll have boxes piled up all around the room, along every wall, every surface. There's boxes and things. And their cars will be stuffed full as well. And so being able to treat those types of places is not an easy thing either. So, but yeah, when they're inviting it in and leaving the food around and basically being general slobs, it's really hard to keep those under control.
Yeah. Shrag, I think one of those jumped out to you. Which one do you want to go to?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I think you probably remember cooling cooked food is such an important process in a food establishment. And I think, Kristen, you had shared some story about people not cooling things properly. It was like a pre-cooked chicken. And, after we hear your side, maybe all of us, I don't for that matter, we'll probably stop eating cooked chicken. But what did you see that was so glaringly blatant?
I think you're talking about a bus tub full of, and it was actually a clean bus tub that looked fairly new, full of chicken that they had recently cooked.
At least the tub was clean.
The tub was clean, and it was sitting on the floor in the kitchen next to the dishwashing area, not like almost right next to the sink area, with a dirty fan. Like the blades were really, really dirty and kind of greasy, had picked up like kitchen greases, and dusty. And so the fan was just blowing right over the top. So they were trying to cool the food down. They were trying to do the right thing.
Of course.
But they just didn't take into consideration the rest of the story, the rest of the requirements.
Cooling down from 135 to 41 in less than 6 hours. I think that's what they're trying to achieve.
That's what they were trying to achieve.
But we all know what happens to that chicken, especially right next to that dirty fan that's blowing on the floor.
Yep.
So maybe in closing, we're doing Family Feud Environmental Health Edition at the NEHA conference this year in Phoenix in the middle of July, 14th, 17th through the 17th. And we had an interesting conversation recently on the podcast with Kristen from Jackson County, and she had a question that was just killer. And so I want to actually pose it to them all here in closing because I think it's fun.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I really liked it. And it's a two-parter. So as a environmental health specialist at home, in your home kitchen, what is the one rule or regulation that you fastidiously follow no matter what at home? And what's the one that you're just like, whatever? I will start with Caitlin. We'll just go in the same order.
Oh, putting me on the spot. I do cook a lot, so I try to do a lot, like follow a lot of the regulations. I would say one of my biggest one is washing, rinsing, and sanitizing my countertops, because I'm kind of crazy. The one that I don't follow well is wiping cloths. Like I will reuse a towel fairly frequently to like pull things out of the kitchen or out of the oven, and then I'll like wipe my hands on it, and then I'll use it to maybe wipe up a spot. I try to keep it like if it gets really nasty, I'll obviously not use it, but I have a wiping cloth all the time.
But there's a difference, right, between your own dirt and a stranger's dirt.
Exactly.
Part of the reason, yeah.
I live alone.
Sense.
It's just me.
Melissa, rule you don't follow and the rule you will never not.
Yeah, I don't cook that much. My husband does most of the cooking, so lucky him. He gets a built-in inspector while he cooks. So
How does that work out?
He's always asking me questions, but I'm also like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? But I
And you're able
would
to
say,
eat 2 meals a day, Melissa?
Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
I would say that I follow mostly like cooking temperatures. So, like temping the food when like meats when they come off the grill or out of the oven or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
And the one thing I don't follow is exactly what Caitlin just said. She does follow is like really wiping down the countertops after, and making sure to use like an actual sanitizer, instead of just wiping it down. So that's my kitchen.
Have you ever gone into inspection mode on your husband? I just have to ask, like, have you broken out a thermometer or?
Yeah, and even like I mean, often pulling out, like just peeking on things while he's cooking. He's like, "Can you get out of here? Let me do it."
Oh my God. Yeah, that, blessing and curse to live with an
Mhm.
inspector, right?
Yeah.
And so, Kristen, I hope it's the same answer. Like it hasn't changed since then. You've already been through this because it's your question. But for those that haven't seen your episode or answer to it, what was and is your answer?
So for the one that I always follow, the answer that I gave was not eating food that's more than a week old. I won't eat, I won't do it. I won't eat it. I make sure it goes to the chickens. But after that, I thought, oh, I probably should have said chicken cooking temperature. But because I also do check my thermometer. If I'm making chicken, I pull out that thermometer and make sure it's the right temperature. So I guess it kind of changed. And then the one that I said that I don't follow at home is bare hand contact. I know some jurisdictions don't have that any longer, but that is something that I would not put up with in a restaurant that I do at home all the time.
I think that one falls under the same category. Your dirt versus a stranger's dirt, and
Yeah.
you can live with that. So, so I understand here in closing. You okay with this, Shrag? Because I think they've done some digging into like your old photos, and there's that picture of Chirag. Are those ballet flats? Those are. So that's it's a nice design and color, Shrag.
Oh,
you
yeah.
got good taste.
Christina's getting some work done back there behind the camera.
Ballet flats, the official shoe for health inspectors everywhere. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you all taking the time. Shrag's here in the studio. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Keep logging your stories. And we'll also, I want to throw out to the audience, especially all the ones that are inspectors. We'd love to hear your stories. Now, you can put them in the comments. If you want to send them to us privately, you can do that at beyond at hscloudsuite.com, beyond at hscloudsuite.com. Special thanks, 3 of the best software implementer project managers in the business, in large part because they are former leaders and environmental health specialists. Caitlin Gappa, Melissa Rogerson, and Kristen Geary. Thank you all so much for joining, and we will do it again. We'll keep the stories rolling. Look forward to the viewer and reader and listener content. And Shrag, anything in closing? That was a lot of fun.
It was fun, and like you said, I think we should do it again and spend some time and solicit questions and comments and stories from the inspector industry folks that, hey, I've seen something worse than thawing your shrimp on back of your car. So let's hear from you, and we'd love to share your stories as well without mentioning your name if you don't want us.
You can be anonymous. If you want to put your name to it and you want to come on here and tell it yourself, we will be doing more where we have the opportunity for people from around the country to pop in with their stories. So it's up to you. Just like a health department, you can complain anonymously or you can sign your name to it.
Come to Neha booth and come see us and share your story. And never know, we may just record your conversation. And if you want, we can blur your picture if you want.
Do that and disguise your voice.
Yeah.
Make it look really dramatic. But thank you all. We will do it again. And thank you all for listening. Thanks so much in the control room. This one was different for us. And as I told you at the top, we're experimenting a little bit to have 3 people virtually, 2 people in studio. And thank you to David Stiles for setting that up beautifully, as he always does everything around here. And Tina Miller also keeps the trains running on time, producer behind the scenes. So on behalf of all of them and us, I'm Cameron Garrison. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll talk to you next time.